I'd like to be under the sea, in an octopus's garden, in the shade. Octopuses are members of the order Octopoda, which is a type of cephalopod mollusk, and octopuses are pretty unique animals. They're pretty recognisable. I think of all the mollusks, outside of the ones that live on land, they're the most recognisable ones. So octopuses have a pretty unique anatomy. I think that's probably the thing that stands out about them most. They've got quite a large bulbous mantle, which houses the central nervous system. They don't have a concrete brain like a vertebrate would, but they do have the equivalent and it's stored there. Their eyes are also pretty big. They've got pretty good vision. They're obviously known for having their 8 limbs. People would often call them arms or tentacles, but limbs is probably the most accurate word to describe them. And the thing that's most famous about the octopus's limbs are that each limb has its own brain, and that isn't strictly true. The central nervous system housed within the mantle is still the brain of the octopus. However, each limb is sent individual nerves, which do give them autonomy from the others. The octopus limbs do function independently from each other, so it's kind of half true. And they're obviously covered with various suckers, which they use to catch prey. Pretty much all octopuses are predators, and they hunt things from fish to crabs to other mollusks. And the siphon, which is on the side of their, I guess, head, is what they use to propel themselves through the water. Basically, it creates a constant flow of water, which propels it through the water. Octopuses are also pretty well known for squirting ink as a defense mechanism, which they're able to do to create a cloud which distracts predators and they're able to escape. And octopuses also have quite interesting breeding behaviour. Octopuses are not long-lived animals. They generally live up to about 4 years. That's about the max an octopus will make. Generally speaking, a year is probably average for some of the smaller species. But octopuses will generally mate once. The males tend to die after they've mated. The females will last a bit longer. They'll lay the eggs, and a lot of species will care for the eggs as well. The most famous instance is the giant Pacific octopus, which is also the largest species. They'll basically hold themselves up in a little crevice, care for their eggs for quite a while, and in that time they won't feed, and they'll eventually starve to death, and the young are able to feed on their bodies to give them some nourishment and a head start in life. The octopuses definitely have quite a tender side that we tend to not think about, I think. But the most famous thing about octopuses for us is probably their intelligence. Octopuses are known to be the most intelligent invertebrates, and I think the intelligence of octopus is something that kind of intimidates us because most other animals that we'll allow to accept their intelligence, things like apes, dolphins, elephants, corvids, parrots, dogs in some cases, most of those animals are mammals, and all of them are at least vertebrates. Octopuses are the only animals that are not vertebrates that we do acknowledge are intelligent, and that has traditionally posed a conundrum for us because for a very long time people thought that humans were the only animals that were capable of a certain degree of intelligence. Things like tool use was a specifically human thing, and over time we realised that that wasn't the case. Other animals like chimps, corvids did this, octopuses do this. So that has definitely challenged the notion that intelligence is a specifically human and then mammal and then vertebrate thing. In fact, it's present in animals that are so far removed from us, and that is something that's definitely moulded our perception of octopuses. But octopus intelligence is pretty well understood. In a laboratory setting specifically, octopuses have been observed to do various things. They're very good at solving mazes. Octopuses are actually very good escapologists. It's not uncommon for octopuses in labs and aquariums to escape their tanks in search of mates, food, generally out of boredom. And even in the wild, it's pretty well documented that the octopuses will get onto it and off ships through pretty small crevices. As I've said, octopuses are known to engage in tool use. There's that one species that's able to use coconuts to basically enclose itself within it, allowing it to move around freely without being attacked by predators. In a laboratory setting, octopuses have been known to engage in play behaviour. There's one octopus that was basically squirting water at a plastic bottle and moving it around the tank. It did this until it got bored. There's also some evidence to suggest that octopuses are able to learn by observation. Octopuses are actually able to identify individual humans. There's a study where one human would interact with the octopus by giving it food, and the other would just stand there, and it knew to identify which was which because it would show off for the one that gave it food. They've been able to display quite a wide variety of behaviours associated with intelligence, so I think the intelligence of octopus is something that cannot be denied. And I think because octopuses are so intelligent, and possibly just because they look so weird, we tend to view them with an air of suspicion. There's quite a lot of monsters in mythology that are based around octopuses. The Kraken's probably the most famous one. Even in Greek mythology though, Medusa and the other Gorgons were definitely based on octopuses. While Medusa is known to be more associated with snakes and has snakes growing out of her head, the fact that there are 8 growing out of them is very reminiscent of the shape of an octopus, and I don't think that's too much of a stretch because octopuses were first noted in the Mediterranean, and Greece is obviously, a Mediterranean country, so it stands to reason that octopuses would have been something they would have encountered. I think throughout fiction, octopuses have been portrayed as sort of deep-sea monsters that pose a threat to us, even though there really aren't any species of octopus that pose a threat to us. I think giant Pacific octopus have been noted to aggressively interact with humans in the past, but they generally didn't do too much damage, to be honest with you. And there's also this really weird thing, especially in Japanese culture, of octopuses being fetishized. I think the whole notion of tentacle porn is something that's pretty stereotyped and noted among Japanese pornography. That I don't really know why octopuses have been fetishized. Maybe it's because they're so different. There's a weird kink in that. I can't really get my head around it, but it does seem to be a thing. Like the final thing to note about octopuses and our perception of them is that we've kind of chosen them to represent aliens. In H.G. Wells' War of the Worlds, the description given of the Martians when they were seen out with their tripods was that of an octopus. They had 8 tentacled limbs, they had big eyes, they had a big bulbous head. The octopus's siphon is mentioned as being kind of like an ear. That's kind of continued in a lot of media. There's a lot of media featuring aliens where octopuses have been the sort of template for them. Kang and Kodos and The Simpsons are definitely based on octopus. And even in Doctor Who, the true form of the Dalek, the sort of small mutant within the casing, is also based on an octopus. Octopuses have been the sort of animals that we've chosen to represent extraterrestrial life, probably because they're so intelligent and they're so different from us, and I think we feel that that intelligence is just something that shouldn't exist in octopuses. While octopuses have not been held in the most positive esteem by us, there is actually a lot of arguments about octopus welfare. In a laboratory setting for quite a long time, the common octopus was the only invertebrate that you couldn't just experiment on willy-nilly. Most other invertebrates you can kind of do with what you want in a lab setting because of the octopus's intelligence, and also because its central nervous system is so developed, and have also been deemed to undergo pain. Therefore, they have been offered quite a lot of protections, and actually that's been extended since to other cephalopods as well. The central nervous system of the octopus is probably one of the most developed in nature. It's possibly even more developed than our own. So I think to suggest that octopuses may undergo pain is probably underselling it. Octopuses possibly feel more pain than we do. And I'm going to finish on this documentary that came out a few years ago. It came out during COVID. It was called My Octopus Teacher, whereby this guy basically interacted with this octopus over a year off the coast of South Africa. He was basically going through some mental health issues, and he kind of got a new lease of life for interacting with this octopus. And the octopus did seem to interact with him as well. He used him as defense from predators. When it was injured, it did seem to come to him as if looking for assistance. Now, I don't know how emotionally attached the octopus was to him. Octopuses aren't social animals, so there's no reason to indicate that octopuses are particularly empathetic animals. However, it was interesting to know that it did seem to recognise him as something other than a threat. And there was a weird relationship that did seem to form between them, at least a one-sided one on his side. And I think that documentary actually touched quite a lot of people. I got a lot out of it. I know a lot of people that aren't even interested in animals that found it quite a moving story. And I think considering octopuses are animals that are so far removed from us, they're an animal that's harder for us to connect with and therefore empathise with. I think the fact that that documentary touched so many people is actually a testament to how, charismatic octopuses are. And maybe our perception of them has changed quite a bit. So yeah, to summarise, octopuses are pretty cool. They've got a really unique anatomy. They're really intelligent. And that's the main thing we know about them, and that has definitely shaped our perception of them. For a long time we've held them in a very negative regard. We've viewed them as monsters, and then we chose them to be the symbols of aliens, that extraterrestrial threat. They've got more rights now, and modern media has shown that we actually can empathise with them and we can care about them. So yeah, let me know what you thought of this video. Do you have any octopus stories? Do you have any strong opinions of octopus? Let me know. I actually don't have any octopus stories. I've never seen any octopus in the wild, so if you have, let me know. Yeah, feel free to recommend other animals you'd like me to talk about, and as ever, feel free to like, comment and subscribe, or don't if you don't want it. It's perfectly fine. And I'll see you next time for whatever I'm talking about, and goodbye.